Hey guys, what's up? It's Ripe again. In today's video, an entitled army wife called the police on me after I refused to give her my land. She insisted her son deserves it more than me. Here is what happened. Subscribe to Ripe on YouTube and hit the bell to turn on notifications. This story takes place in Southeast Asia. I always loved living at the edge of the city, and the neighborhood I have found is the most perfect place. Everyone is nice and helpful except for one woman. She is a military wife, so her husband is almost never home. Every time that I met him, he was the nicest person ever, but his wife is a problem. She is super entitled and arrogant, and she acts as if she had some kind of authority over us and that we owe her something. She is always the one to knock on people's doors, mentioning every single thing that she dislikes about them, their yard or their house. She is the typical Karen, always overeating, exaggerating everything and being annoying. She is the only one in the neighborhood that is allowed to listen to loud music and have parties and do any other normal activity. I also had an incident with her a few weeks ago. She came knocking aggressively on my door and I opened it calmly. "What did you use for your yard? Your grass is very green," she said. "Thank you, nothing. I just mow it regularly," I replied confused. "Your lawn looks better than mine, which is unacceptable." "My husband is risking his life for all of you and you're being disrespectful," she said angrily. "How?" "Just take care of your lawn and it would look better," I replied shocked. "You don't understand what you're talking about. This is disrespectful because I know you did it on purpose and you will regret this," she said and left. For a long period after that, she kept throwing garbage in my yard. I had multiple fights with her about that, and I also started throwing her garbage back in her yard, but she did not like that. Once she even threw some chemical liquid that destroyed my lawn. An ambulance and the police came, but nothing happened. I did not have any proof that it was her. I only saw her silhouette. No one saw her for real because it was the middle of the night and she did not admit to it. That is when I installed security cameras all around the house to always have proof and to always know what and how it happened. She did the same thing to some other neighbors, but there was not much we could do. We kept ignoring her and trying to take revenge on her. We even talked to her husband once and he apologized for her behavior. However, we did not need apologies, we needed her gone. The only time when she got arrested and stayed the night was when she vandalized someone's car. As she explained then, the car was too cheap for the neighborhood, making her look bad. And by the way, Ripe stars, one thing I just noticed. The first time I read this story, I was sort of confused how the neighborhood contacted the wife's husband, seeing as he was probably deployed or something since he is military. However, I was told that they simply contacted him via social media. That should have come to my mind first, but anyway. She decided to ruin the car so that those neighbors would buy another one, not to mention her Saturday parties with her rich friends. This party consists of 5 rich women laughing and talking very loudly outside. The party starts at around 9 AM and ends at 11 PM and the music is loud, but they are louder. I tried talking to her about these parties, but she tried to slap me and threatened me with more violence. She was always having the dumbest reasons to start fights and she always thought that she was right. She also had a son who was just annoying as his mother. He always played football with his friends in the middle of the street, and when anyone told him to move, he would just scream after his mother. The shocking part with this boy was that he was not a child, he was actually graduating college this week. When he graduated, his mother threw him a party in their yard. All of his friends were drunk and loud, running up the streets and playing games. One of the boys even got into my yard and started running around. No one in the neighborhood said anything because we did not want to be the annoying neighbors that ruined the boys' party. The next morning, I hear knocks on my door. It was Karen. "So here's the thing, I want to buy your property," she said. "What?" I asked, confused. "My son just graduated and he deserves a nice place. He likes your house and your yard. I want to buy it for him," she continued. "I'm not selling my property. There are many other places out there," I replied. "I want him close to me. Plus, he likes your place," she added. "Get away from my property, Karen." "I'm not selling. You can choose. You either sell it to me or you lose it," she said, smiling. "I would rather lose it then," I said and closed the door. I could not believe what I just heard. How can she have such ideas? I did not want to sell my house, and even if I did, I would never sell it to her. Everything seemed to settle after that. The military wife did not mention anything else about buying my house, and I was shocked because she always tried getting what she wanted. One night, as I was watching TV, I heard police sirens stopping in front of my house. They shout my name and they tell me to get out of the house. I go out with my hands and I was shaking. They start digging in my yard and they find bags of what looked like drugs. "Those are not mine," was the first thing I could say. "These are not mine either, so whose are these?" replied the police officer. "I got security cameras, let me at least check," I said. The police agreed and came with me to watch the footage. On the video from the previous night, I could see the military wife jumping her fence into my yard. She started digging and burying those bags with the drugs. She then called and gave the police an anonymous tip. "Do you know this woman?" asked the police officer. "Yeah, she's my neighbor. Her son graduated and he wants my house, so she told me that she wants to buy it." I then refused and she got really angry. I believe that is her way of taking revenge. "We are gonna arrest her for illegal possession of cocaine, for breaking onto your property, planting false evidence, and lying to the police," said the police officer. The next thing that happened was amazing. The police went to Karen's house and arrested her. She kept yelling and crying, saying that she was innocent. She was arrested and I finally felt free and safe. Unfortunately, her son was now alone, and even if he was old enough to take care of himself, I still felt sorry for him. His father was not home very often, so he was mostly alone, and I then befriended him. We now hang out together, sometimes even with his friends, but it was still nice. I could clearly see that he was an amazing young man and that his mother's influence was the thing that made him annoying back then. He was not upset or anything, and he actually seemed happy without his mother. Karen is now in jail and she will be there for a long time. And yeah, Ripe Stars, unfortunately the author did not specify which Southeast Asian country this story takes place in. However, for clarification, a lot of countries are really strict when it comes to possession, selling or whatever of drugs, and it can involve really long sentences if you get caught. So it does not surprise me in the least that Karen will be in jail probably for a long time. Anyway, let's continue to the next one. We will now read a few stories from r/Ask Reddit that concern HOA stories that you have not heard before. So the first one starts like this. I had to get aggressive towards the HOA hack Nazi that used to stalk our old neighborhood. The HOA kept harassing me for vehicles parking on my lawn while I was on business trips, and I had to remind them that they were not my vehicle and I cannot control what others do when I'm not home. Then they continued sending me fines for unkempt property because my neighbor's lawn crew would not mow the incline between our properties, which was technically not even my property. Another time I got a fine for letting in too many people in the community pool. There were RFID cards for entering the pool area, except I never actually got mine and did not want to touch that Band-Aid urine swamp. I was always calling and fighting these morons. One summer I had enough with the poor drainage issue. These anthill cookie cutter sardine can crap-built neighborhoods are typically excavated out without much thought in terms of proper drainage. It's a very common problem that the developers ignore and let the homeowners deal with. I got sick of my backyard turning into mud every time it rained and the water would build up against our foundation. So I built a short retaining wall on one side and graded the side against my house and extended the patio bricks out to help keep the water from pooling up. It was a weekend project with some simple rented equipment and 2 buddies helping out. No permit needed, and I made sure it did not violate any of the 10 billion rules in the HOA handbook. It turned out looking beautiful and improved drainage so much that the grass grew better in our yard and our neighbor's yard. A few weeks later I noticed someone walking around in my backyard looking in my windows. It was the angry HOA narc, some retired woman who would walk around and inspect everyone's property to send complaints to Berkshire Hathaway. I walked outside and asked her what she was doing. She said, "I can be here, I'm with the HOA." "No, you are trespassing, lady. Get off my property." She started rattling off all the violations. I had enough, so I said, "Look, you can either get off my property or I will remove you from it." She gave me this nasty scrumpled up frown and said she would call the police. I said, "Oh, I would hate for you to do that and not have a reason. Give me a second." I went inside, opened the nearest window and wrecked an empty shotgun. She then left in a hurry. I called BH and asked if they condoned people trespassing on my property without asking for permission or stating a reason. They said, "Absolutely not. We will address this with NARC. She should not be doing that." A few weeks later, I saw the narc going through my neighbor's yard. We moved out not too long after that. The next Ask Reddit story is titled, "Be Too Loud?" I will get revenge. In September of 2020, the apartment next to mine was let out to two young women, both students. After they settled in a bit, it turned out they wanted to have a party. No big deal, except Belgium was in full lockdown at this point due to the pandemic and you were supposed to only have one fixed visitor over. But then again, to be young again, etc., so I did not really care. During this time though, I was working in healthcare. I work with the mentally disabled, but I volunteered for the ad hoc COVID team, meaning I got called upon to tend to those residents who were sick and needed quarantining or were effectively diagnosed with the virus. This meant pretty long working hours and I spent about 10 to 11 hours a day at work with a full hour bike ride to and from work. Needless to say, I was pretty tired pretty much all the time, so I was not looking forward to the noise from a party, but I'm pretty chill and know that living in the city, some noise is to be expected. So they are having their party and I can stand some noise and music, but this party was really wild. People were shouting full on in the hallway, wrecking things, etc. At about 4 in the morning I introduced myself to the neighbors and asked them when they could expect their company, 20 plus people, to leave. And if they could refrain from having a party the next day, as I have to work and get up at 6 every day. So they promised they would keep it down the rest of the night. They didn't, and that they wouldn't have a party the next day. Plot twist, they did have another party and then did another one the day after. At this point, I'd been going a full 3 nights without sleep and was nearing neurosis. Every night I had talked to the girls and every night they would be full of apologies and stuff, but nothing would change. I also felt terrible when I had to enter their place because it would be absolutely packed with people and I work with some very vulnerable people at work who I wouldn't want to spread the virus to. This was pre-tests, pre-vaccine, pretty much the knowledge we now have about COVID. Luckily the weekend came and they went to their parents and I could recover a bit. Suffice to say, I was not really liking my new neighbors. During the next few weeks they refrained from big parties, but they would have a constant flood of people coming over during the night. And by constant I mean constant. Like their bell would ring 70 times a night and people would always be coming or going. And those people would be drunk and very loud. Our communal hallway is pretty much an echo chamber because it's all stone and any noise will travel throughout the building. Basically I could not rely to sleep at night. And honestly guys, that building would be a total nightmare for me because I record so many videos. Anyway, it drove me crazy. I could only sleep Friday through Sunday because then they would go off to their parents or whatever. I could not grasp how they could know this many people that would always be coming and going. During one night while knocking on their door to complain about the noise, I encountered my upstairs neighbor, who is also on Reddit by the way, and decided that he would have to join forces to get this to stop. My neighbor told me some important bit of information. The reason there were people coming and going all the time was because they used their apartment as a makeshift bar and hangout. During this time, bars were closed due to COVID and all those students were using the big apartment to hang out. Moreover, across the street was another frat house with 5 boys living there, and that too was a secret hangout. So basically, people would hang out at those 2 places and cross the street if they wanted a different atmosphere or wanted to see their other friends, etc. And the boys from across the street would also come over 15 times a night. Most visitors seemed to be law students or affiliated with them at least. Basically, our communal hallway was just a part of their cafe space now, so we tried talking to the girls. Then we started to talk to the visitors. None of them had any sympathy for us when we were asking them to be quiet at 4 in the morning. Most of them just laughed at us as we were the pesky neighbors, no doubt. Even more of them were just so wasted that they didn't know what they were doing. So then we started calling the police dozens of times. Most of the times they were not let in and police told us they couldn't do anything. We kept calling as we wanted a record of our calls in the system. Belgium was still in full lockdown at this point, and what they were doing was full-on illegal. Even so, police told us their hands were tied if they wouldn't open the door. When the police couldn't help, I turned to the next best thing. I'm a social worker and I have no problems locking up information and calling around to look for help. So this is what I did. Most places, student unions, police, town hall were understanding but could not really do much. So I acted on the suggestion of the upstairs neighbor and contacted one of the girls' dean. I shot him a nice email about sorry to have bothered him and taking up his time, but I had this big group of students from his faculty ganging up every night and maybe he wanted to know about it since they were breaking every possible COVID rule that existed at that time. Especially since me and my neighbor were about to go to papers with this story, as secret lockdown parties were becoming a thing in the paper at this point, this dean called me back right away and we had a nice talk about our problems. He told me he was in on it, so basically what he did was call the law student girl and her parents. Then big drama ensued and we finally got to sit down with the girls and they finally sounded like they were sorry. Tears were shed, for which I had no patience, to be honest. We learned that the police had actually been inside a few times and they were issued tickets for having secret parties. Those were 300 euros each a pop, so no idea why they did not just stop. We learned that they were not happy because the dean had called them up at 11 o'clock and they were still asleep. To which I said, well, there is your problem. You are still asleep at 11 o'clock. I'm up at 6 every day and you girls have not been a bit understanding about that. So we got to feel a bit like we got our revenge and we got to vent, but we kept it kind of nice and parted in good terms, hoping that this would have been it and we could live together as nice neighbors. But if that were the case, I would not be here, right? You would think they would have gotten the point now and would refrain from making noise and partying. Well, you would be wrong. Basically, what they did was they moved to the frat house across the street and started partying there. There were slightly less people running to and from, but the noise was still a problem, and we were now in the middle of the second COVID wave and these people were meeting up with big groups like crazy, while I had not seen a soul in almost a year. Never mind the people at my work who were forbidden from even going to their own friggin' family. The whole thing was just ridiculous. My upstairs neighbor happened to film such a party across the street and had sent the clip to me. We were thinking about going to the press with our story, but we're not really sure if it would be a good idea. So I posted the clip of the party on the subreddit of our country to test the waters. It got quite a few comments and upvotes, and it seemed most people were also sick of people disregarding the rules and having secret parties. After some talks with the upstairs neighbor, we decided to contact the press and simultaneously go up a step in the university hierarchy and contact the vice rector that had the power to start up a disciplinary case against the students. This person is one of 12 vice rectors for a total campus of about 15,000 students, so he was quite high up. Things moved really fast. Local news actually picked up our story from Reddit and contacted me, and we gave some background info. They confirmed with the police that cops had been dozens of times to our address and across the street and were not let in most of the time. We mentioned that the university was involved and that we hoped they would finally intervene. The next day, the piece was on their website. It went viral there and got promoted to the sites of most national newspapers. Its headline was sensational though, mentioning the dozens of times police had showed up and also mentioning how healthcare workers were being kept up by selfish students. At the same time, the vice rector contacted us to take our statements, which we already had prepared up on paper, and informed us that they would investigate and could possibly start up disciplinary actions. At the same time, more reporters were contacting me throughout the day, and we made sure to mention that to her and link the university the printed articles. The next day while at work, I got a message from the upstairs neighbor that a film crew from the national news was at our doorstep. He declined to talk to them, and I would have done the same, since this was getting pretty big now, but they made a segment anyway. And sure enough, that night at 7, here was my street and a short section about cops standing in front of a closed door a dozen times, and the local press cop talking about the troubles of closed doors. The best part about it was that a student from the offending frat across the house had let the film crew in and said on camera exactly what we were accusing them of towards the university. That they had been having parties and did not let the cops in, and that they had done it multiple times. No idea what made him think that that was a good idea though. Anyway, trying not to make a huge story even longer, the press died down some time later, thank God, and the disciplinary action from the uni went through. Before the hearing, we sat down with the girls from our block and cleared some things up. We wanted to live like normal people together, and we tried to make some amends. Because we put in a kind of good word for them, they got the lighter end of the stick, which was 40 hours of community service and some probation. The guy across the street got 80 hours each, and each had to write us a letter of apology, which I thoroughly enjoyed reading every time I got one. The sad part is most of them sounded just like stupid young kids, but that was after getting called out on the news and being part of a disciplinary action. However, we never wanted to escalate things this far. Some noise is to be expected when living in the same building, and we were never gonna go to these extremes for some expected noises. However, these people went to the extremes, and so we were forced to do the same. Rest of the year, a simple message on WhatsApp was enough to silence any noises we had coming from their apartment. If anything, I hope they learned that even very polite and chill people can become very upset when presented with sleep deprivation and excessive noise. And yeah, Ripe Star, seriously, when you are too nice to some people, especially neighbors, if they have an evil mind, at some point they might try to exploit your kindness. It certainly happened to me a few times in life, so nowadays I'm a bit more careful when it comes to making friends with others.